Hello, and welcome to VOW, Voices of Wisdom, the show that might not be for everybody, but everybody needs to watch this show. And I'm your host, Brenda Simmons. I always like to thank the LTV staff and the town of the town of East Hampton for this great opportunity. The VOW Voices of Wisdom is based on relationships, and the topics that I try to bring to the audience is informative, educational, and sometimes controversial. Today I have on my show, my guest has graduated from LIU with a bachelor's degree in business. Actually, she was the last graduation class of the Southampton University, Southampton Long Island University. She received her master's degree, her MBA, at St. Joseph's College. She's also been an employee of Bridgeham National Bank for over 12 years. She's held every position possible and most recently promoted to branch operations coordinator. And about 2 months ago, which is very recent, she accepted position as training and development manager. And also, she is the loving mother of my 14-year-old granddaughter. So needless to say, I'd like to introduce you to my daughter, Tiana Grampus. How are you, darling?
I'm great. How are you?
Good, good. The subject today is Generation Y. We were sitting around Easter Sunday having dinner, and her new position as training and development manager, she had to do a workshop. You had to do a workshop?
It was more of just a training class, but it was a class that incorporated what we're going to talk about today.
Okay.
And the actual topic really just was kind of a segue into learning about different people and how you, or I guess basically the benefit of learning about, different people and how they're different, and sometimes why they're different, which helps you basically communicate with them or work with them better. So,
right.
So it was cool.
So I'm going to let you start to basically give us we're going to be talking about the 4 generations.
Right.
And I want you to just give us a little breakdown, overview of the 4 generations and the different characters in them, if you will.
Sure.
And even the dates of time, too, as well.
Sure. I have them written down, so it doesn't refer to my card. So the oldest, I guess, generation, or the generation that has been around for the longest, is the mature generation. And of course, these dates are kind of general. But the dates for the mature generation were people that were born between the years of 1922 and 1943. We have the baby boomers. They were born between 1944 and 1960. Generation X, born between 1961 and 1980. And then Generation Y, born between 1981 and the year 2000. The mature generation, those were the early 20s and 30s and then the early 40s. Some of the historical events during that time were World War II,
right,
was generally the Great Depression,
right,
and of course there are a couple of other things, but those are two of the kind of more, I guess, prominent or more the historical events that kind of made more of a difference, I guess. I felt like,
and it probably affected
exactly, them more.
Exactly.
During the Great Depression, of course. It was just a hard time, for people to live.
Exactly.
And, so that brought about a lot of different values within that generation.
Right.
Just some of the different characteristics I have are they were very hardworking.
Right.
But then they were also, respected authority. They also demanded respect. They were very formal. Because they were so hardworking and that they had to work, opposed to do other things like education. Education wasn't kind of one of their top values,
right.
So they weren't as educated as some of the other generations. Education was kind of for those that were privileged enough to be able to go to school,
right.
or get education, opposed to actually working.
Right, right.
And then some of the different kind of other things about them, like I said, they wanted to be respected. You must respect them. They came from a traditional family structure,
Right.
where they were both parents,
Right.
you know, mother, father, 2 kids, and a dog. I mean, it was like the whole
Yes.
picket fence house.
Yes.
You had dinner at
Yes.
5. You know, that whole kind
Exactly.
of formality.
And they had dinner together.
And they all eat together and that kind of thing. And just this was really kind of interesting to me. But they were also a group of people who always felt like they did things the same way all the time, like
Right,
and
routine.
they weren't and they didn't like kind of deviate from that for any reason, or another. It was just basically, this is how it's done. This is how it's always been done. We've never done it any different. This is just the way it is.
So they kind of stayed in the box, more say.
Basically. So then we got to the baby boomers. Some of the historical events during that time I have are like JFK, rock and roll. I don't know which one kind of piggybacked the other, but you also had the hippie movement, which also was correlated with rock and roll, and then the civil rights movement.
Exactly.
And then just kind of, as far as technology goes, they had like the first pagers.
Right.
And I mean, we don't even see pagers anymore, so it's pretty funny to to know that was the first time there was a pager, kind of introduced to society. Meanwhile, mature generation, there was none of that. It was, you had a payphone, and it was probably rotary.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And this was probably the beginning of technology as we know it now.
Right.
Believe it or not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then some of the characteristics I have for them, they were workaholics, and it is a little. I think felt like it was a little different from hard workers.
Okay.
Hard workers. I don't know. I do feel like there's a difference between hard workers and workaholics. People that were workaholics, a hard worker would be someone to me that would, put in their all, but they would be home at 5 o'clock
the key.
to have dinner.
Exactly.
And that kind of thing.
Exactly.
A workaholic is someone who would that was their life, and they kind of neglected other things.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
That was kind of my take on the difference between those two. They also were really big into personal fulfillment. They questioned authority, and then they were also you start seeing the diminishing of the traditional family structure.
The whole family, yeah.
Right. And it was funny because the questioning authority, you think about it, was the civil rights movement.
Exactly.
The hippie movement. A lot of that really kind of, I think, molded a lot of the way that generation
because
kind of
actually
was.
The mature generation also really went through slavery.
Right.
They experienced slavery.
Exactly.
So I think the baby boomer generation was saying that's not going to happen to us.
Exactly.
And I happen to be one of the baby boomers, by the way. Can you tell? And so that was a very hard, that was a stern thing for us.
Right.
That's not going to happen to us, and we're going to fight this. So that's why the fighting authority kind of came into play.
Exactly. Exactly. Which isn't really a bad thing. They were big on changing things, opposed to we've always done it this way.
Yes.
This doesn't seem to work. Let's try and make this better.
Right.
That was kind of some of the things that came out of the
and I think when we were
boomers.
talking at dinner that time, we also mentioned that there was this fear factor that we saw kind of in the mature generation to a point where they wouldn't step out the box because they were fearful.
Right.
They felt more stable to stay where they were.
Right.
Instead of taking the chances, as baby boomers decided, let's try this. Let's do this.
Something else.
Yeah.
Well, right. And I think a lot of it was because they had the door opened.
Right.
For them to do that. And like you said, even going back to kind of the slavery day, obviously that really was specific to a certain ethnic group.
Right.
But I do feel like, say, the mature generation, the man was kind of the strong figure.
Yes.
So they kind of said this is how it's done.
Yes.
And the women didn't always have, the equal rights. Women's liberation didn't come about until your generation as well, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't put that down here, but I'm pretty sure women's liberation came about during that time as well. So your generation had a lot of stuff, in my mind, going on as far as bringing them from, here